The pod door blew open before I could brace for it, and the air of Thren 9 hit me like a fist made of heat and rot. I fell out onto wet stone, gasping, my ears ringing from the drop. Somewhere above me, the Alliance shuttle was already pulling away, its engines fading into the thick, bruised sky. No countdown, no goodbye, just silence, where a rescue plan should have been. My name is Kate Sullivan, and 30 seconds after landing on the deadliest planet in the surveyed galaxy, I understood exactly what had happened to me. I was not being tested, I was being erased. The Interspecies Survey Council had sent 42 expeditions to this planet over the years. None had returned whole. The place did not even have a real name among the other species, only a warning label. Thren 9, quarantined, do not attempt landing without full military escort. I had neither. I had a torn duffel bag, a water filter, a short blade, and a tracking chip that, as far as I could tell, existed only so someone could find my bones later. A council delegate named Voss had arranged this. He hated that a human had a seat at the table. He hated it enough to call my last assignment a diplomatic failure, dress up an execution as a routine field assessment, and drop me into a jungle that ate every team it had ever swallowed. I got to my feet. My legs were shaking, but I made them stop. The forest around me glowed faintly, threads of blue light running along vines like veins under skin. It was beautiful in the way that certain poisons are beautiful. I had read the mission logs before the flight, back when I still believed I was going as an observer. Predators here hunted in coordinated packs. Storms rolled in on some chemical trigger nobody had mapped. And somewhere in the deep canopy lived something the other species only ever called the Undoing, because nothing that met it ever sent word back. I had 30 days before extraction, if extraction even came. I decided, standing there with my heart hammering, that I was not going to spend those days waiting to die. I was going to spend them working. The first thing I did was find high ground. Every predator on every world I had ever studied, including the ones back home that we hunted to extinction generations ago, respected elevation and sight lines. I climbed a ridge of dark stone until I could see the tree line from above, and I watched. Watching cost nothing, and told me everything. I saw the paths animals used, worn smooth by repeated feet. I saw where the glowing vines thickened, which usually meant shelter from rain that fell like acid twice a day. I saw birds, if they could be called that, avoiding one particular valley entirely. That valley is where the pack was. I did not go near it. Not yet. Instead, I built. Humans have always survived by shaping the ground around us before we ever raise a weapon, and 30 days is a long time if you refuse to waste them being afraid. By the end of the first night, I had a rough shelter wedged into the stone, walled on 3 sides, with only one entrance I could defend. By the third day, I had a fire that burned low and steady, using a resin from the glowing vines that did not attract the flying stingers I had seen swarming near open flame elsewhere. By the 5th day, something started watching me back. It was large, low, and moved on 6 limbs, with a kind of coiled patience that told me it had hunted things smarter than me before. Its hide shimmered faintly, the same blue light as the vines, which I would later understand was not decoration but communication. It circled my camp twice at a distance, never closing in, and I realized with a strange, cold clarity that it was not stalking me the way predators stalk easy prey. It was studying me the same way I was studying it. On the 7th day, it made a mistake, or perhaps I did. It got caught in a game trail I had reinforced with stakes to keep smaller scavengers out of my food stores. Its leg was torn, and it thrashed, and every survey report I had ever read told me the correct response was to retreat and let nature finish what my trap had started. I did not retreat. I do not fully know why, even now. Maybe because back home, every large predator I had ever heard of was already gone, hunted into memory, by people who saw only the threat and never the animal. Maybe I did not want to be the last chapter in that same old story. I approached slowly, speaking in a low, even voice, the same tone you would use on a spooked horse. It could have ended me in one motion. Instead, it went still, watching me with eyes that held more calculation than rage. I cleaned the wound. I packed it with a paste from crushed root fiber that I had already tested on my own skin and knew would not cause harm. The creature let me finish, then vanished into the tree line without a sound. I did not expect to see it again. 3 days later, it returned and left a kill outside my shelter wall, untouched, and disappeared before dawn. That was the moment everything on Thren 9 began to change. Though I did not understand the scale of it yet, I started calling the creature Ash, for the pale streak that ran along its spine. Ash began appearing at the edges of my camp more often, never asking for anything, simply present, the way a dog waits near a person it has decided to trust. I kept working. I mapped the territorial lines between packs by watching where Ash would and would not go. I used controlled smoke and scent markers, techniques as old as human civilization itself, tricks we used long before we had a word for domestication, back when taming a wolf or a horse was simply the difference between starving and surviving. By the 12th day, smaller scavengers that once tried to raid my stores at night stopped coming near my camp at all. By the 16th day, I understood why. Ash was not just accompanying me. Ash was marking me, in the language this ecosystem understood, as something that outranked the usual order of the food chain. I built more. Not walls this time, but structure. I repurposed old trap frames into pens that could hold water safely away from the acid rain. I rigged the tracking beacon, the one meant only to locate my remains, into a low-frequency broadcast that mimicked the territorial calls I had heard Ash and its rivals use. It was not a cry for help anymore. It was a boundary line, and for the first time since I had fallen from that shuttle, the jungle respected a boundary I had drawn. There were still dangers. On the 20th day, a storm rolled in faster than any pattern I had recorded, and I barely made it to shelter before rain that could strip bark from trees began to fall. Ash pressed against the entrance of my shelter that night, not for warmth, I think, but because something in that storm had frightened even Ash, and for the first time, the fear in the jungle and the fear in me were pointed at the same target instead of at each other. We survived it together. By the 25th day, other creatures had begun to give my camp a wide, respectful distance, the same way junior members of a pack avoid an alpha's den. I had not fought a single one of them for that respect. I had simply outthought the entire ecosystem, one pattern at a time, the same way my species always had, not through claws or size, but through patience and observation, and the strange, persistent refusal to accept that the natural order could not be reshaped. On the 29th day, I stood on the ridge where I had first surveyed the valley, and I understood what I had built. Not a shelter, not a survival camp, a territory. Thren 9 had a new order now, and somewhere in the last month, without ever intending to, I had become the center of it. On the 30th day, the shuttle returned. I heard its engines before I saw it, cutting through the canopy toward the coordinates that were meant to mark a grave. I walked out to the clearing to meet it, and Ash walked beside me, and behind Ash came others, creatures the survey logs had once listed only as threats, now simply present, watching, deferring. The door of the shuttle opened, and I saw Voss standing there, along with 2 other delegates who had clearly come expecting to file a closure report. I watched every trace of certainty drain from Voss's face as he took in the sight of me, unharmed, flanked by the very predators his own species had spent decades documenting as unstoppable. Nobody spoke for a long moment. I broke the silence myself, because I had spent 30 days learning that silence on this planet was never empty. It was always full of something deciding what to do next. I told him he had not sent me here to die. He had sent me here to meet something this world had never encountered before. Not a bigger predator, not a stronger one. Something that understood patterns, that built instead of only fighting, that offered a wounded animal care instead of a blade, and found, in return, an entire ecosystem willing to change its shape around that one small act of patience. Thren 9 was reclassified within the season, no longer marked as a death world on any coalition map, but as the first territory in the sector under human stewardship. Ash stayed close, the wound on that leg long since healed, and every so often, when the storms rolled in with that same electric warning I had learned to read in my first week, we would sit together at the mouth of the shelter I built with my own hands, and I would think about how every other species at that table had weapons, and ships, and armies. We had something else, We had the oldest habit of my kind, the one written so far back into us that we forget it is even a skill. We do not simply survive a wild place. We learn its language, and then, patiently, we make it home.